What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hockey Talk Show. This is a quick hit video. If you're new to the channel, we do daily NHL news and discussion. We usually do live shows where you can comment in or even call in. So if you're new, consider subscribing. The NHL released some craziness today, a tiebreaker scenario, which would, in this particular case, involve the Philadelphia Flyers and the Florida Panthers. Now, these two teams could potentially come down to a tie in all the tie breaking categories, which is kind of crazy because I think there's like 3 or something like that. So seeing this and seeing the potential disaster in all this, the NHL just announced randomly on this Friday afternoon a tie breaking scenario. They would add a play-in game, which in this particular case would be played on Tuesday, April 10th, which is one day technically before the NHL playoffs start on Wednesday, the 11th. So here is what they said. If at the conclusion of the regular season, 2 teams competing for the final playoff berth in a conference, if they're tied in points, regulation plus overtime wins, which is one of the first tiebreakers, points in their season series, excluding the first home game for a team that has an extra home game. Some teams play 5 games, so the first game that the team who has the third game, 3 out of the 5 games at home, the first game gets washed. And a goal differential for the season, the following procedure will apply. So if they're tied in points in all those 3 bonus areas, a tie-breaking game will be played. An equally weighted draw will be conducted by the league promptly upon the conclusion of the last game of the regular season to determine home ice advantage, meaning they'll flip a coin or they'll put 50 balls for the Flyers, 50 balls for the Panthers in a drum and select it that way. Should the score of that game be tied at the end of regulation, playoff overtime rules apply. So no 4-on-4, no 3-on-3, I should say. What year is this? No 3-on-3. It'll be 5-on-5, sudden death, 20-minute periods until the winner is determined. So this is what the league announced today. So can we literally come down to this scenario for the Flyers and the Panthers? The answer is yes. It's kind of nutty, but in the NHL, anything can happen, and it's not impossible. So here's what needs to happen. The Panthers have 2 games left. The Flyers have 1. If the Flyers lose by 2 goals against the Rangers on Saturday and the Panthers win in overtime, obviously by 1 goal, for their next 2 games, that will mean both teams are tied in all of those categories and points and then the 3 tie-breaking categories. I mean, you never really think that with 3 tie-breaking categories, you'll ever get to the point where you'll need a 4th tie-breaking category, which would be this play-in game. But I guess it's possible. But let's look at this from a long-term planning standpoint from the National Hockey League. Something that was discussed, I'm not sure how privately or not, but I know it was discussed. I don't know if they really talked about this too much, was this play-in game possibility. Playoffs are a ton of revenue for teams, so they always try and get the most out of this. Remember, you no longer have to pay the players in the postseason, right? All their salaries are done in the 82 games. So any ticket revenue or anything like that that the teams are making, they get to pull that all in. By the way, ticket prices for games a lot more expensive in the playoffs. Plus, there's a lot more TV money. There's a lot more national TV exposure, all that stuff. Playoff shirts, I mean, you name it, parking concessions, all this. It all goes into the kick of the owners. Some teams could make in the tens of millions, even just with a first round playoff exit. So it's really important that every team gets in. So building in another playoff round with a playoff game is really important to owners and something that they're definitely looking into. So essentially what would happen would be where you would have, I guess, the 8th seeded team, or, looking at it now, the second wild card team, whoever finishes in that spot would play the first team out of the playoffs right now. So essentially the second wild card would play a third wild card for the right to get into the playoffs and then face what would be essentially the best team in the East or the West. It's something that baseball has done recently. It's been pretty successful. And I think it's something that the National Hockey League is definitely going to incorporate over the next 2 to 3 seasons. Think about it. You just added Vegas. You're going to be adding Seattle as well. And who knows after that, Houston or Quebec. There's going to be a lot more teams in the league. They're going to want to try and squeak off more playoff teams. This would essentially add 2 more playoff teams to the mix. So it would be that second wild card and the third wild card, or right now the bubble team, the first team that doesn't make it, would play a 1-game playoff for the right to get into the playoffs and play the best seeded team in the East or the West. It's kind of an interesting thing. Let me know what you think in the comments below if you would like to see that added. I honestly don't see a drawback to it. It's worked really well in baseball. It is super exciting. You're not really taking anything away from anybody. It's the last team to make it in, and you're giving another team a chance to potentially get in. And as we've seen with the Kings and some of these other teams that, Nashville went to the finals being the last seeded team in, the last seeded team could make some noise and maybe perhaps make an upset or two. So I think that's pretty interesting. Let me know in the comments below. What do you think of the NHL's tie-breaking scenario? And do you like this idea of a play-in playoff game, one-off game, for an extra 2 teams to have a shot, potentially? Well, they're not going to have a shot. They're going to be in the playoffs themselves. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Touching quickly on John Tavares and the Sedin twins. Let's start with the Sedin twins. Super special night last night for them, their last game in Vancouver. I found it to be wonderful that they got the overtime winner, and they were on the ice for that. They were doing what they do. They had possession the entire time on that shift. It was unbelievable to see. And for them to get the winner, I thought it was great. Here's what's super interesting to me. There's a weird number thing going on with the Sedins. They wear 22 and 33. And the reason why they wear that, by the way, is because they went number 2 and 3 in the year that they were selected. That's the only reason why they wear those numbers. Anyway, number 22 scored with an assist from number 33 at 2 minutes and 33 seconds in overtime. Not to mention that, but Daniel scored a goal with an assist from Alex Edler at 33 seconds in the second period. Alex Edler, by the way, wears 23. A lot of 2 and 3s going on in the last game for Vancouver for the Sedin twins. That was just nuts. By the way, total classy, again, on the part of the Arizona Coyotes for shaking their hands. And the Sedins went up and down the line and shook all the hands of the Coyotes, just like Vegas did the previous night on Tuesday. So I thought that was a class move worth mentioning. And finally, the last thing here for the night, John Tavares. We did a lot on the Islanders on the last episode of the Hockey Talk Show. If you follow along, you can get it on YouTube or Facebook or podcast form on Spotify, iTunes. You can consider subscribing there as well. All this has links at hockeytalkshow.com. We did a ton on John, but he did do some post-game interviews last night. It was the final game, home game of the season for the Islanders, potentially his final home game for the Islanders. They beat the Rangers. It was a great game. I watched it. Really fun. I saw some of his post-game comments. I didn't see this one, but this comes from Brian Compton, who's one of the best in the biz, Isles blogger, and he's a deputy NHL.com managing editor. I don't know what his title is. It's super fancy. Anyway, he has a quote from John Tavares, and I think it's a sign of some hope for the New York Islander fans. He says, and I quote, "I'm not trying to look at it as it's the end because obviously that hasn't been determined. I've always wanted to work it out and stay, so that's what's still what I hope transpires." So that's still what I hope transpires. Which is good because, he said this from the get, that he always wanted to stay, but that he was going to take this time and blah, blah, blah. And then he went super generic for a really long time and didn't do a whole ton of press. But this is the first time in a while I've heard him then express those sentiments to stay. So I don't know if he is or not. I still have a feeling he will, but I think this comment was no mistake on the part of John Tavares, who's very careful and very calculated when it comes to doing interviews. I think he's leaving the door open big time for the possibility of returning to the Islanders. I think that's just what's happening with him right now. I don't know if he knows. I don't know if he's decided. I think he's going to listen to other offers and then make a decision. I think the Islanders have the home team advantage of being able to land him back again. but he could still possibly leave. But the point is, having followed this very closely, him saying, I've always wanted it to work out and stay, so that's still what I hope transpires for the first time in a long time, I think is a good sign for Islander fans. And again, I think we're all going to be watching as the Islanders wrap up their season on Saturday. But the entire league wraps up on Saturday except for the bonus game that was not bonus game, but for the makeup game that was missed on Sunday. And then maybe this play-in game, we'll see what happens there on Tuesday. But the entire season ends on Saturday. So we may do a quick little bonus show for you guys on Sunday surrounding who gets fired, because there may be some people getting fired. Maybe people don't get fired on Sunday. Maybe they wait till Monday morning. That's a possibility too. But I think GMs and some coaches are going to be handed their pink slips. And Garth Snow is definitely on that list of possibilities. So we'll see. We'll see if John talks to ownership, and we'll see if he says, look, I'll stay, but I need the team to go in a better direction. Next step is to get rid of Garth Snow. So we'll follow all that and more. 5 live shows next week on the Hockey Talk Show, YouTube Live and Facebook Live. Make sure you guys are following. Make sure you guys are subscribed and hit the bell on YouTube, and that you like the page on Facebook, but also that you hit follow and that you're getting notifications first on Facebook. That is super important. Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, and the Stitcher apps. Guys are subscribed on the podcast. Thanks so much for that. But make sure you guys are rating and reviewing so that we climb up the list for hockey podcasts so that we can continue to grow. Thanks so much, everybody. Love the support as always, and I will see you guys on the next shift. Take care.